Let's continue with Pirkeh Avot. We have now Rabbi Yosef who's teaching us something here. So it says like this: This is an important thing to understand. It says that your friend's money should be beloved to you like your own money. So this has some depth to it, right? What's the idea here? The idea is like this, Some people, when they spend their own money, they're so careful, right? They don't want to lose nothing. They don't want to lose one penny, When it comes to other people's money, they're very generous, very liberal, Yeah, don't worry, take it. So that's the thing, So a person has to watch out for his friend's money just like his own money, Meaning what? Be careful, guard it. Chazal said, by the way, that we're obligated to guard our friend's money. This is from the Torah also. Where do we see in the Torah that we have to guard our friend's money? Hashavat Avedah, right? So what does it say in the Torah? If you see your friend's lost item, right? Something, he lost. You have to give it back to him. Return it to him, And you got to take some effort to do that. So what does that mean? Don't just say, well, it's not convenient for me, I don't have time for that. No, you got to go and take it, and guard it for him. Be shomer, guard it for him. You got to do that. Why? Because that's exactly what we're saying over here. What do you think? His money is less important than your money? So right? Kol Israel, Aravim Zerazeh. That's what it says, right? We're all responsible for each other. So if you see your, fellow Jew, right, his money or something, his item, his object, whatever it may be, you got to guard it for him. Make sure he doesn't lose it. So we're obligated to guard our friend's money just like our own money. That's the way it is, So that's why a person has to be careful about that. Don't say, well, I got enough problems. I got enough of my own problems. His problems now. I got to take care of his stuff. So the truth is, that the Torah goes very far with this concept, of guarding other people's money. So what does that mean? Sometimes, if you lose the money, if you lose his money, you got to pay for it. There's different kinds of shomerim. Shomer chinam, shomer sachar, right? Then there's socher, right? There's shoel, all kinds of people, who are guarding your money. So sometimes, a person, if he was negligent, let's say a person gave him something to guard, his friend, right? Came to him. He says, yeah, my friend, can you hold my phone? I'm going out there. Hold my phone for a second, I can't take it out there. So what happens, right? Now, if this guy was negligent, right, when he's holding his friend's phone, and it got stolen, right? Because he wasn't guarding it, he wasn't putting his eye on it. He has to pay for that.
He's responsible.
He's responsible for that. Sometimes, depending on the situation, right? Sometimes he's responsible if he was shomer chinam, if he was just not getting paid, he was guarding it for free, as a favor. Still, even if you're doing it as a favor, you have to be careful, not be negligent. Because if you're negligent, if you did something which is negligence, you got to pay for that item if you lose it, if something happens to it. It's your fault. But you're going to tell me, but he didn't pay me, I was just doing him a favor. It doesn't matter. If you took it on upon yourself to guard it, that means you're responsible, right? Don't be negligent. So you got to make sure you guard it, Just like you guard your own phone, you got to guard also his phone. Why? Less than your phone is better than his phone? Why? Well, what's the difference, right? It's all the same, right? So that's the thing, you got to be careful with that. So this is like a general thing, with the Jewish people, we're like, what it is? The Jewish people, it's like a private club, that we're like together, as brothers. We have to watch out for each other. You know what I mean? So I watch out for my stuff. I also got to watch out for your stuff. What about your stuff? No, I didn't see it. Well, you did see it, but you didn't pick it up. You just left it there in the street, right? So what kind of Jew are you, right? A person who does that, by the way, doesn't guard his fellow's thing that he lost or something, he's transgressing, from the Torah. He's breaking the rules of the Torah. When he doesn't, he's not careful about that. So that's what we're saying, be careful, Make sure you guard his stuff just like your stuff. But they say, if you're shomer sachar, so what does that mean? He paid you to guard it, that's already a higher level, right? Higher level. He paid you, So if you're shomer sachar, and even if it wasn't negligence, just, it was stolen or something, whatever, you have to pay for that. Even though it wasn't negligence. Why? because that's what you were paid for, right? To guard that thing. You failed, right? To pay to guard it properly, so you got to pay, right? What about a person who borrows? That's even a higher level, right? You borrow something from. I borrowed your car, right? I went, I drove, and I got into an accident. Well, I got to pay for that. If the insurance will pay, he'll pay. But if not, I got to pay. You're going to have to pay also the deductible maybe, if you, right? Since you crashed the car, so deductible is $1,000, you got to pay $1,000, because you borrowed the car from him. You're responsible. So the truth is, a borrower is on a higher level. He has to be even more careful than anybody else. Even if it was something like unavoidable, he still has to pay. Why is that? Because the borrower is not paying nothing to you. Like he's taking it for free, so he's just enjoying it without any responsibility for himself. So therefore, if something happens, he's responsible for everything. A borrower. So it depends, right, on the level. Depends on what level you are. There's shomer chinam, shomer sachar. There's borrower, right? There's also renter, right? Socher. That also has its response. It's also high level. Renting, when you rent something. So whatever it may be, right? You gotta be careful with your friend's thing. Also, hashabat avedah, right? If you don't return your friend's lost item, you gotta pay. So that's it's not really you don't have to pay, but you're responsible for that. You sinned, right? You don't have to really have to pay if it was something lost. We don't obligate them to pay like that, but we do obligate. There's a sin involved there. He sinned. So that's what we're saying over here, right? Make sure you understand that your fellow's item is just like yours. You got to be careful with it. You got to guard it. He's a Jew. He's your brother. You got to guard his stuff. Don't be negligent and don't be irresponsible. That's what we're saying. Okay, very good. So let's move on. Right. So another thing now he says that atzmecha lilmod Torah she'enena yerusha lecha. So he says, you know what? Tells you in Pirkeh Avot, prepare yourself to learn Torah. Prepare yourself. What does that mean to prepare? What's there to prepare? So the truth is, you got to prepare to learn Torah. You know why? Because first thing before you learn Torah, what's the number one thing you got to do? You got to learn Aleph Bet. They used to, in the time of the Tanaim, Rabbi Akiva, when they would see Am Haaretz, or somebody who converted to Judaism, the first thing they would teach him was not the art scroll Chumash, with English. This is not what they did. What they tell them, this is Aleph, this is Bet, this is Gimel. They would spend a little time on that first, before anything else. Why? Because if you don't know Aleph Bet, how can you learn Torah? What kind of Torah is that? You don't know the language, It's like a language barrier, That's not good. So you're going to tell me, Rabbi, but I can, use the English ones, the Russian books, Yeah, it's true, but it's not the same thing, You think that learning in a foreign language is the same as learning in Lashon HaKodesh? It's not the same thing, It's a different level. There's one rabbi who used to say, one big chacham. He used to say, if a person learns Torah in a translation, right? It's like, a person who got married and, when he did the chuppah, right? So what did he do? He kissed his wife, but he didn't lift up the veil, like you're kissing her through the veil. What kind of kiss is that? You're going to enjoy that? You're kissing the material, with some kind of silk there, whatever. Who wants to kiss the material? You want to kiss the woman, right? That's the joy of it, the whole thing. That's the same thing, with the Torah. When you learn Torah in a different language, it's like you're kissing through the veil. You're not lifting up the veil. What kind of kiss is that? That's not a good kiss. That's the thing. So, okay, whatever, it's all good, right? So you get the idea. So you got to prepare. Number one, you got to learn Aleph Bet. And then, I'll tell you, there's also another thing you've got to do. Once you learn Aleph Bet, okay, now I know how to read. Oh, good boy. Good boy. You learn how to read? Oh, very nice. But there's more to do. That's not enough, right? So what does that mean? Now you got to learn the words, the vocabulary, the words. What does this word mean? What does this word mean? I'll tell you guys a interesting story. It's a true story. It happened to me, When I first started learning Torah, I was like very young, whatever. So, I was learning English books, like everybody does today. So, one time I went to Lakewood, my rabbi was living there in Lakewood. I went to visit him, I told him, I said, Rabbi, I said, I don't know how to, understand the language, I have a problem with this. You know what I mean? So, I'm limited. I can only learn the English books. It's not the same thing. I told him, I said, what should I do? Tell me, what should I do? Rabbi, what should I do? So, you know what he did, right? The rabbi, he goes to the shelf, right? Pulls out a chumash from the shelf. Opens it up. And shows me, says, okay, can you read this? Yeah, you understand what it says? So I said, no, Rabbi, I'm sorry, I don't understand everything there. Got a problem, You know how long ago this was? Like 40 years ago, this whole story. Right? So now, right? So I said, Rabbi, what do I do? How do I solve this problem? So you know what he told me? He said, take the chumash, right, from the beginning, right? Bereshit, bara Elohim, et hashamayim et haaretz. And so get every word, get a dictionary, nice dictionary, Jastro, whatever. Every word, I want you to know what it means. Every word. Boom, 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 boom. Like this. And also the Targum, right? Onkelos, right? Targum also, right? Every word, Aramaic. Because the Torah, our Torah, it's not one language. It's two languages, right? You know that, right? It's not only Hebrew, it's also Aramaic, Aramit. If you don't know both, right, you don't know how to learn Torah. It's still no good. There's a story like this, right? They say in the Talmud that there was one king, Melech. And he told his subjects, he told them, he said, you know what? I want to know what's written in the Torah of the Jews. I'm interested to see what's going on there, Intellectual king, he wants to know what's going on, right? So what happened? So they told him, he says, we don't know we don't know Hebrew. What can we do? I cannot tell you. This was the old days, before there was translations. So what happened was, right, that he told them, he said, you know what, I want to make a commission, komissia, I want you people to learn Hebrew, and come back to me, and then teach me what's in the Torah. I want you to go for 2 years and learn Hebrew first, and then come back and teach me everything. Bah! He made a komissia, the king, right? So what happened? They went for 2 years, to learn. They came back, so the king tells them, he says, okay, so, can you tell me now what's written there? I want to know. I want to know everything, right? So you know what they told the king? He said, no. I said, you honor the king. He said, Al Melech, we cannot tell you. Why? So he says, why? What happened? So they told him, because it's also another language there. He says, we don't understand Aramaic. He says, we don't understand Aramaic. Hebrew we know now, but Aramaic we don't know. We don't know the Aramaic. This is the problem. So what did he do? Right? He made another komissia, the king, right? Different commission, So he told this commission, I want you to learn Aramaic. 2 years, come back to me and teach me what's in the Torah. Bah. So he made another so this commission, right? One for Hebrew, one for Aramaic. Like this, So they came back, after 2 years. They told him, they said, you honor the king. He says, we learned Aramaic, Baruch Hashem, Aramit. We learned. Problem is, we don't know Hebrew, They know Hebrew, we don't know. So we can't understand what's going on, One group knows this, one group knows that. That's not good enough. So the king told him, he says, okay, fine, He told him, you know what, I want both of you now to learn both languages, right? Learn Aramaic and learn Hebrew also. Every person should know both of them. So only then, they were able to tell him what's written in the Torah. Otherwise, they couldn't help him. You understand? Why? Because the Torah is written in two languages. It's not only Hebrew; it's Aramaic. Like the Chazal say, it says the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when He created the world, He taught Adam HaRishon two things, two languages. One is Hebrew and one is Aramaic. So they both come from Hashem. Aramaic. It's not a man-made language, Aramaic. But it's not so kadosh like Hebrew, Ivrit. It's like tameh. It's more like, chol. It's not kedusha there so much, like Ivrit. So it's two different levels, Also, when we receive the Torah in two languages, right? Hebrew and Aramaic. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught us both languages. The Goyim, they took Aramaic and we took Hebrew. You know why? Because the Goyim are tameh. So they took the language which is tameh. It fits with them better. We are kadosh, so we have a Lashon HaKodesh. That's the thing, So different levels for different people. That's what it is, So that's the only way. Now you understand, right? What he's telling you here. If you really want to know, the Torah, first thing you got to do, number one, is learn Aleph Bet. Aleph Bet Gimel Daled. That's how they do it. There's no other way. Don't try to make shortcuts, Yeah, I'll read it in English, in Russian. Well, it's not the same thing, my friend. Don't delude yourself. You got to learn the language. Yes, it takes time. So I'll tell you something. This rabbi told me, as I told you, my rabbi, he told me to learn all this, Chumash. So I learned the Chumash from beginning to end, like this, every word in the dictionary. Buch, 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 buch. Hebrew, Aramaic, and it really worked, Once I finished it, I really knew, what I was reading.
What language you translate? You're reading Chumash. What language you translate?
It goes into English, right? It goes into English, of course, yeah. Yeah, of course, but that's the thing, There are very good dictionaries. I'll tell you something. You know what's the secret? Yeah.
You understand in English or in Hebrew?
Well, once you become fluent in Hebrew, it's like it goes straight. You don't need English anymore. You don't need that, middle. In the beginning, yeah, it's a struggle. You got to struggle with it. It takes time. It's like a crutch. You're walking on a crutch. It's like you got to struggle. Eventually, you can stand on your feet. You don't need the crutch anymore. Throw it away. That's the way it is. You got to do that. So that's the thing. To learn the Torah, it takes preparation. You know how many years it took me to get the languages? Just that, like 3 years. Just on that. Before that, I wasn't able to understand it. There's one rabbi, told me here in the neighborhood something really funny, because his sons, learned in yeshivot. So right, he learns with them. His sons. He's Israeli, but his sons were born here in America. So what he told me? He says, I have to tell you honestly. He says, I see these boys, these American boys, they're learning Torah. He says, but the problem is they don't know the language. This is the problem. They don't know. They don't know Ivrit. They don't know Aramit. They know, like generally, but they don't really know, exactly what it says. Every word, they don't know that. This is the problem, So the American boys have a disadvantage in learning Torah. You know why? Because they have a language barrier. This is the problem, We all have this problem here in America. It's the same thing, We all have this issue. We all have to go through this. So the only way to learn Torah is to prepare. That's what it's telling you, right? So it's telling you it's not Yerusha. So you know what that means? It's not Yerusha. You know what that means? It's a very important thing to understand. That the Torah, what's Yerusha? Lo aleinu, when somebody dies, right? Your father, right? Lo aleinu, your grandfather, you inherit the money, right? Oh, you get his money. You inherit it, right? That's called Yerusha. So he's telling you, right? Learning Torah is not Yerusha. It's not like automatic, Yeah, he died, now it's mine. Doesn't go like that. Just because your father was Chacham, Talmid Chacham, doesn't mean you're going to be Talmid Chacham. It's not Yerusha. You're not going to inherit it from your father. You got to do it yourself to work. Even though it's going to be a little bit easier, because he helped you. Of course, it's going to be easier. That's no question. But still, you got to do the work. Otherwise, it's not going to be Yerusha. ברוך ה' לעולם, אמן ואמן. רבי חנן, שאומר, עשה הקדוש ברוך הוא לעוזר בישראל, לפיכך חיבר להם תורה ומצוות, שנאמר אדוני חפץ, למען צדקו יגדיל תורה וידיר.